I'm Sam Taylor, sports reporter with the Tribune. I cover Washington State and prep sports. With me is the legendary Dale Grummert, a sports vet and now copy editor of the Tribune. Dale, how's it going?
Good. How are you, Sam?
I'm well. Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And it's just, we're still getting used to it. This is year 2 of this circumstance. The Apple Cup is coming up, but it's not like 20 degrees outside. It's not snowy. It's going to be like 80 on Saturday, and it's in September. To start with, I guess, just how weird is it to have the Apple Cup in September?
This is my first September Apple Cup. It's very strange.
Yeah. And of course, you covered Washington State for many, many years. Right here at the Tribune, starting in 1985. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What do you remember about your first Apple Cup as a pro?
I remember it was a really impressive performance by WSU. It was Mark Rippon, and he was really at the top of his game at that point. He'd had some rough times at Wazzu, and eventually became an extremely good quarterback and a Super Bowl champion. But that was a kind of a breakout moment for him at that 1985 Apple Cup.
When it comes to covering an event as a large scale as the Apple Cup with as many eyes on it, and it's probably maybe one of your most read stories of the year, how do you approach covering an event like the Apple Cup, and what's your approach to an event like that?
Try to approach it like any other game, just like the players do.
Yeah.
Your heart may be beating a little faster, especially toward deadline, but you try to maintain a consistency throughout. And if you alter your process very much, you're going to probably pay a price for it.
Yeah. And with the Apple Cup, obviously, it's a very lopsided rivalry over the years. UW leads the all-time series at this point, 76-34-6. And so, and listen to anybody, you've obviously seen more UW wins and then WC wins in that series.
Yes, I have.
Yeah.
It's it's really not a great rivalry, in my opinion. It's everything to Washingtonian football fans. But there's been some excellent games throughout the 100 and some years, but overall it's been a weak rivalry game in my opinion.
Yeah, and of course you allude to some of those high profile stakes, especially in Washington State football history. At times, the trip to the Rose Bowl has been on the line. In terms of all those highs and all those lows, which moments stand out to you in the history of the Apple Cup?
Well, the all time. From a Washington State perspective, the all-time highlight is 1997, because that took them to their first Rose Bowl in 67 years. It was Ryan Leaf at his best. It was in Seattle, so that was a very unusual victory for Washington State. There have been, I can count the number of Wazzu wins in Seattle on my two hands. The post-game celebration was something I had not seen to that point and have not seen to this day. It was surreal. It was like Moses leading the Israelites into the promised land.
So that is quite the picture. Is that just Wazzu just flooding that Husky Stadium field?
Yes. It was not a riotous affair, is in my opinion, in my memory anyway. Maybe I've smoothed out the edges over the years, but I remember it being surreal.
Yeah. And then, obviously when the highs like that, what are those post-game atmospheres, post-game interviews like with the coaches and with the players?
For the Apple Cup, they're all over the map because the game times have been all over the map. So the afternoon games, the 1 o'clock games, Apple Cup interviews are very pleasant, cordial for the most part. Interesting things said because it's an Apple Cup and you've just experienced an Apple Cup. It may be your first, in which case you are a changed person slightly. You are not the same person you were before the Apple Cup. And there are some who came away basically expressing that. Dennis Erickson, for one.
What were Coach Erickson's remarks?
I don't remember exactly, but it was something to that effect. That is something that I have never experienced before, and you don't really know what it's going to be like until you experience it. It's just the level of intensity.
Wow.
And it does, I've badmouthed the rivalry a little bit, but it lacks nothing when it comes to the intensity of the experience.
Yeah. And Wazzu, it's never been one that necessarily favors Wazzu. They've never won more than 2 in a row, right?
That is correct. That is correct. They've never won more than 2 in a row. And the fact that the game is played in November usually works against Washington State because they tend to be, in recent decades, they tend to have a passing offense, and they're trying to pass in the snow or the rain. Games in November tend to favor a program like Washington's, which is solid. Over the years they've been solidly run-oriented team.
Yeah, and we saw that September date benefit the Cougs last year under Jake Dickard, who starts the season really hot. He started like 2-0 every year, and at times 4-0, and that was another hot start to the season for Wazzu. And finding the Huskies, the rebuilding Huskies at that point. At first year of Jed Fish and being a neutral site at the Seahawks Stadium.
Tell me about that game.
Yeah. So last year, and this is where a lot of these emotions are being built up because for Wazzu, there's just a handful. There's just 20 or so players who played a role in that game left on the team, about 40 or so who were just on the roster for it. And so the majority of the starters on this year's team are transplants. They're from South Dakota State. They're from New Mexico State. They're from other schools they've chosen to spend their season, their 25 season at Wazzu. And, but last year's Apple Cup, you had Wazzu with John Mateer. He was just, breaking records left and right for Wazzu, and he was on the map. And this is the game that arguably raised him on the map. He had a future NFL wide receiver in Kyle Williams that helped him. Josh Meredith from San Diego, like so many of these Cougs, they come to Wazzu not knowing what this Apple Cup thing's all about. And then they participate in several games, and then they play a large role. In this case, Josh Meredith had like a touchdown, 100 yards, several catches. He was all over the field. And then, of course, it all comes down to the goal line where Kyle Thornton, they run the speed option. UW QB Will Rogers shovel passes to running back Jonah Coleman, who the Cougs will see again on Saturday. And then linebacker Kyle Thornton, senior of the Cougs, and pretty much the entire Cougar defense is right there to shove him out of bounds and clinch that game. And so, the Coug fans showed up to that. Huskies did as well. Obviously, it was just about, maybe on a good day of traffic, 20-minute drive from UW's campus. But it was about 50-50 purple and crimson. And the Cougs, of course, rushed the field, and Cougar fans got to lift the Apple Cup. And it was quite the joyous atmosphere afterward. And just, their third Apple Cup win since George W. Bush's presidency. So you can understand the elation.
Yes. There is nothing like Wazzu elation after an Apple Cup.
Yeah,
that they won.
I want to ask about the last time Wazzu won in Pullman in 2012, which was Mike Leach's first year. Obviously, Coach Leach never won another Apple Cup. That was, I was reading
it's interesting. Of all the coaches in the history of that school, he's one of the best in terms of overall accomplishment. He ranks last in his Apple Cup winning percentage.
Yeah. I was reading your 2018 game where Wazzu obviously had a chance to be one of the top ranked teams in the country. They had Gardner Minshew. That was a special year. And Jimmy Lake, their defensive coordinator and eventually head coach for UW, said that, they just do the same thing year after year. This is year 5 of them trying to run the air raid, and we just shut it down. So was Leach's stubbornness just the bane of his Apple Cup success or lack thereof?
I suppose that's possible. To me, it was just inevitable that during that period, the way Washington had built its program and the way Wazzu had built its program, that Washington State was going to lose 45-17 year after year. Yeah. And that was one extension of that. I think the 2018 game came down to the snow. And Normally over the years, snow has favored Wazoo. In this case, it definitely worked against the great quarterback from the state of Mississippi.
Yeah.
And his receivers, who also were uncomfortable in that game.
Definitely. And then contrasting that to 2012, Leach's first year, what really went well for Wazoo in that game, which was another thriller.
Yeah, and that was, I think that was Apple Cup vibes going Wazoo's way. And it was a wacky game, and WSU started off feeling good about themselves, and that increased over the course of the game, which is not always true at Wazoo. They're often too hyped. A crazy game just eventually went Wazoo's way, and they played well. That was their best performance that season.
Yeah, and obviously not a lot of wins that year. Was that just their third win of the season or so?
Yes, and an extremely poor season for Leach's first year.
Yeah, and now that brings us to this year where Wazoo's already won 2 games. They're 2-1. Not saying they're going to have a repeat of 2012 of just 3 wins, but this is probably maybe this hyperbole, but the least excited any Wazoo fans been for a 2-1 team, or much less for an Apple Cup. There's at least the fact that it's in September, the fact that it's against now a Big Ten school. They're not in the same conference anymore. It just seems super, super bleak. What do you think is the future of this rivalry where you have UW, joining the haves and Wazoo being left behind?
Yeah, I don't have great hopes for the future of the Apple Cup. It has a long history, but they're in 2 different realms right now. The Huskies are in the Big Ten. The Cougars are trying to build a future in the new Pac-12, and I don't see the twain going unbroken for much longer.
Yeah, I mean there will certainly be. Well, you hope. I mean, there's only after this year 3 more years on the contract. They've agreed to play 1 more game in Pullman after this year, and then 2 more games in Husky Stadium. So it'll be back to Husky Stadium.
Yeah. Knowing the Huskies, I can see them insisting upon all games being in Seattle at some point, and Wazoo saying no thanks.
Yeah, interesting. Do you think Wazoo would say no thanks to a deal like that?
I think eventually, yeah. I think it's not in their favor to go over to Seattle and get bashed year after year.
Yeah, even for the sake of tradition or all these things.
If you'd asked me that 3 years ago, I might have said, tradition might hold out a little longer than I think it will now.
Yeah.
Now, this is my perspective. I come from southwestern Washington, which is a little bit of a Apple Cup neutral area.
Yeah.
We really pay more attention to the Ducks and Beavers than we do a lot of us from southwestern Washington. So I'm not an Apple Cup guy, actually.
Wow, I mean that's fair. I mean, and that's you talk about the Civil War, the Ducks and Beavers. That's another lopsided rivalry.
Yeah, where you grew up is a much different story. I know.
Yeah, just the Olympia area, just a few miles north. But it's very interesting just being growing up in the shadow of UW. I'll be honest, I rooted for the Huskies first few, in high school.
I'll bet you did.
Yeah, because that was just the thing to do. I was like, I'll root for both teams, but whoever it helps most. And of course, it always was the Huskies that it would usually help most. And then going to school at Wazoo, was in the marching bands, of course, and now suspended all fandom, and we're just here to report on the game. But I guess in that sense, looking at this Apple Cup for this weekend, I assume I know the answer, but do you have a prediction of how this weekend might go in Pullman?
I think Wazoo is in too much an uncertain situation, and I don't feel good about it.
Yeah.
So I'm picking UW by, say, 3 touchdowns.
Yeah. That would fall in line with the line. UW's a 20.5 point favorite.
Okay. Yeah.
Entering this weekend, and so I guess if Wazoo were to win? Let's say that hypothetical this year. What does that do?
I'd love to be proved wrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
What does that do for Rogers year 1?
If they happen to win that game, that turns things around. That straightens out their heads, and as you know, I think the head is the most important body part in football.
Absolutely. And so looking at, I guess, Dale, is there any other thoughts on the Apple Cup? And, what, I guess this is the first game where alcohol will be sold in Martin Stadium. Do you still feel it at Martin Stadium?
Yes, that is right.
So just what do you think the experience is going to be like in Poland?
Yes, it's not going to look familiar.
Yeah.
I have no idea what to expect in this game. September, alcohol, WSU in completely uncertain situation in terms of its quarterback and everything else.
On a larger scale for college football, is there kind of a solution to this? Can we possibly regain the tradition we had?
No, it's gone.
It's gone.
That is gone. That tradition, that old college experience is completely gone now. We're trying to hash out something else, something new, and we'll see what it is. I don't know, but it's not going to be that old traditional college football experience.
Yeah. Do you think there's some inherent value in what it could be, or what it's becoming? Or
I don't, but I'll be happy to be proved wrong. I think there was a purity about college football and all college sports before the advent of television. Television essentially what began ruining football in the 90s, and it's finally polished off the job.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, John, we could sit here and talk all day about this.
I know. We do. Actually, we will.
We will indeed. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me today to discuss kind of a grim topic locally. And obviously, as we said, it's not what it was, and what it is maybe not something that folks in these parts might like.
Yeah. But, we'll figure it out somehow.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much for Dale Grummert. I'm Sam Taylor. Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Lewiston Tribune Podcast.